And that was the Manik Mini by WOTOFO, and that feels like only yesterday they released this, the Manik Biggie, I suppose we could call it now. This one was a single 18650 device. They've obviously shrunk that right down for this version. This has a 1000 mAh internal battery, can fire up to 30 watts. It comes with two pods that have non-replaceable coils and more traditional looking when it comes to pod style systems. So let's check it out. The Manik Mini is about as generic as they come when it comes to kind of pod systems of this style. We've seen a lot of different pod systems have this kind of look. Very, very simple, very, very easy to use. And this one's no different. When it comes to styling, however, I do really like the look of this one. It's all to do really with this leather effect. Now, I'm a big basketball fan, so this kind of orangey leather looks really good. And it feels pretty good as well. It doesn't feel as kind of squidgy soft as some of the mods and pod kits that we've seen that make use of kind of leather. This one feels a bit firmer, feels a slightly rougher as well, but I quite like it. I think it looks pretty cool, feels pretty nice in the hand. This device, of course, is very lightweight, not extremely light. It feels solid, it feels well made, but it is lightweight, extremely portable and extremely comfortable in the hand. The display, which I shall show you here before I get upside down, very, very simple. Everything is there on the one screen. There's not much to show you when it comes to functions. If I press and hold this, it will reset the puff count. Now, if I press that twice, it will start to flash, and you can obviously scroll up the wattage, which will scroll up to 30 watts. And when it gets there, you can round robin it and go back round again. Once you set it whatever wattage you want it at, if you let it go for about 2-3 seconds, it goes solid to let you know that is the wattage it's set at. So extremely simple to operate. Of course, it's 5 clicks on, 5 clicks off. When it comes to styling, feel, fit, finish, and all that kind of stuff, very, very simple. Just the one button to worry about, and also a micro USB port at the base. Carrying on with the micro USB port at the base. Now, they really need to catch up, don't they, WOTOFO? We're all using USB Type-C now. This is starting to feel a little bit outdated. I'm actually getting low on USB or micro USB cables. Everything's USB Type-C, so I'm glad they included a cable in the kit to charge this. When it comes to battery life, yes, this does have a 1000 mAh battery. Now, the coils you get in this are 0.6, so the wattage that they recommend is kind of between like 15 and 20 odd watts, so you're not going to be using a lot of power. 1000 mAh is ample enough. That's really, really good battery capacity for this size system. I've been getting 2 days battery life out of this at a squeeze. I have found sometimes later into that second day I have to charge. In fact, I had one day where I needed to charge it early in that second day. Generally, I've never had a problem getting through a whole day, regardless of what pod you use. A day's worth of battery life, not a problem. They could have maybe upped the wattage on this, however. Being 1000 mAh, I know it's quite small, but you do have a 1000 mAh battery. I'm sure the device would be capable of firing up to 40 watts. Again, it would kind of depend on what coils they go with, but 30 watts is a fair enough kind of wattage for this kind of device. You don't really need much. It's primarily for mouth to lung, high resistance coils, low wattage output. Battery life, capacity, not a problem. When it comes to charging as well, it's taken about an hour, just over an hour. But I have found that battery, once you get down kind of like near 10, 8%, around there, the output, the actual vape experience starts to die down a little bit as well. You're kind of losing that power. So I've been charging it from about 8% upwards rather than killing it completely, because it's almost pointless vaping this once you get down to 6% because you're not getting much out of it whatsoever. But an hour to charge, no problems at all. Micro USB port, you can charge it on the go. A little bit of a shame that it is on the base though, which means you can't charge this thing standing up. But apart from that, I'm really impressed with the battery life. Included in the Manik Mini Kit are two of these pods. Now, at a glance, they both look exactly the same. And even the small text, which is kind of right at the bottom there, can be a bit hard to work out what it says and what it is. Basically, there's 2.6 ohm pods in the kit. Non-replaceable coils. You can't change the coils. These are refillable, however, from the side there, the little silicone bung. And the hole's big enough to fill up with most of your usual bottles. Both 0.6 ohms. So one of them is the M11, which is a parallel, basically a round wire coil. They recommend to fire between 18 and 22 watts. And the second one, the M12, is a next mesh coil, and that's recommended between 15 and 18 watts. When it comes to coil life, they've been good so far. I've been vaping on these for about a week each, and they're both still going strong. So I'm quite happy with that. It is a bit of a shame that these are non-replaceable coils. It's always good that you can refill them, but it's a shame that you can't replace the coils. I'm a big hater of binning pods like this. There's no real need for it. I'd rather just bin a small coil rather than binning a whole pod. It just seems a lot of waste. This plastic is tough and solid. There's no reason why these pods themselves won't last longer than a couple of weeks. So it's a bit of a shame they're just not replaceable coils, but it is what it is. I suppose simplicity is in mind. The pods themselves, really, really good. No real problems. I quite like the mouthpiece as well. I quite like this shape. Not everyone's a big fan of this kind of duck-billed shape. I find them comfortable to vape on. And the airflow from them is pretty good as well. I've got the M12 Next Mesh Pod installed here, recommended between 15 and 18 watts. I have it at the maximum 18 watts. Let's give it a little bash. Pretty good flavour from the Next Mesh coil. Pretty good. Not the best. It's a solid 6 out of 10 for me. Could be improved, I suppose. Now, there are a couple of things I need to expand on when it comes to this pod and the other one, to be honest. Both of them. There's no airflow adjustment, so you are limited with what you get. It is what it is. Now, the restriction from it is mouth to lung for me. You might squeeze a very restrictive direct lung vape from this, but I've tried and it wasn't very comfortable. It's very restrictive. You almost find you're kind of pulling air in through the side of your mouth as opposed to pulling out through the mouthpiece itself. So more mouth to lung, but it is a loose mouth to lung. It's still comfortable. It's very, very smooth. I quite like that. It's just being a mouth to lung device is not quite tight enough for me. Back to the flavour. It's good. It's just above average. But for Next Mesh coil, I'm slightly disappointed. Moving on to the M11 Parallel, basically a round wire coil, recommended between 18 and 22 watts. I've left it at 18 watts. Let's give it a little bash. For the record, I have exactly the same e-liquids in both of these, just to see how they compare. 9 times out of 10 a mesh coil would perform better. Now I would say these are pretty much on par. However, one thing that this parallel coil does slightly better, only slightly better, is pulls out a bit more of the sweetness from those e-liquids. Just slightly, you can just taste it on the tongue in comparison to the mesh coil. Good flavour, just not the best. Solid 6 out of 10. As the same applies when it comes to the airflow restriction. It's pretty much the same as the mesh coil as well. Yeah, there's not much difference really, only slight differences, and even the wattage adjustments, the wattages that are recommended at, you keep them about the same. So you're going to have to play around with these coils. Which pod suits you, it's just going to have to be up to you. So my final thoughts of the Manik Mini by WOTOFO. Well, start with a few things that I'm not a big fan of, and there's really not many. I will first of all say that the flavour is, for me, not up to the Next Mesh reputation. It's okay, it's average, it does the job, but it's just not kind of what I'd hope for from Next Mesh. The parallel coil done a good job, as good as the Next Mesh, which was surprising, but I just feel the flavour could just be improved by this, definitely. When it comes to kind of airflow restriction, I like a tight mouth to lung draw. This doesn't offer that. There's no options to adjust the airflow, which is always going to be a con for me. Everything should have adjustable airflow in my opinion. Micro USB port on the base. There's two problems there. First of all, it's a micro USB port, and second of all, it's on the base. I use a lot of USB Type-C ports like we all do. We're seeing USB Type-C and everything. A bit outdated now, micro USB, and on the base, which I don't like having to plug this in while it's laying down. You just got more chance of e-liquid spilling out of the pod itself. Speaking of spillage, now I've been using this and the other pod for a couple of weeks, and bone dry, and always bone dry. I've literally had no problems. Not even, I'm just double checking myself now because I keep checking things. There's not even a drop of condensation. Nothing. Almost, you could almost say these are leak proof, or at least for me they have been so far. I've had no problems, which is great to see from any system ever made, because we see a lot of systems that leak. This one doesn't, or hasn't for me so far, so really impressed with that. The screen and the display is extremely simple. Now, I don't like it, but that doesn't mean it's not functional and not simple. It's just very plain and a bit old-fashioned, I suppose. When it comes to fit, feel and finish, it's a very, very simple system to use day to day. Very, very easy. It's kind of idiot-proof, I suppose. Very, very simple. It's not got any kind of cool bells and whistles to it, but I like the look of this basketball effect. I think it looks pretty cool. It feels pretty good. Yeah, it's just, for me, really, I suppose, the performance is just a bit lackluster. That's all it is. No airflow adjustment, and the flavour's just not the best. So I hope that's helpful, folks. If it was, hit the like button or subscribe if you fancy it. Of course, you see my latest review there. A random one there. Big thanks to WOTOFO for sending this over for review. I'm Flacco Vapor. Thanks for watching.